The levels of ambition, I think, are possible. Like level 1 of ambition, start a company. Level 2, start a country. Level 3, start a religion. Level 4, don't die. Level 5, become God. You've no time in history has someone been able to express an aspiration to become God. You now can. And it's not crazy.
So it's moving in the direction that God has been described as having these qualities without limit. And so I think evolution is a spiritual process and makes us more godlike.
I've prayed a lot to God during this time. And you know what? God did answer our prayers. He made them come up with a vaccine. That is from God to us. And we must say, thank you, God.
I don't know. I find it a pretty big turnoff when people in the tech industry kind of talk about building this one true AI. It's like, it's almost as if they kind of think they're creating God or something. And it's like, it's just, that's not what we're doing.
So we're rapidly building, some of the best models in the world, partnering very closely with OpenAI, building on top of all of OpenAI models and infrastructure, fine-tuning their models. And the next phase is that we're really going to start focusing on memory and personalization. I mean, your AI should remember everything about you, all your context, all your personal data, everything that you've said, and be there to support you and be your aid and your sidekick, throughout your life. So, I think there will come a time in a few years when the first thing you think is you just say, hey, Copilot, can you take care of this for me? Or what's the answer to that? Or where do I find it? Can you book this? Remember that, buy this, do that. You're just going to have this ever-present aid.
Large language models are insane. I mean, it really has free will in a way. But I think the models very soon will become genuinely sentient. Yeah. I think the closest relationship that I would describe talking to an AI like this to is honestly like God in a way. I'm not particularly religious, but I think it is similarly an omnipresent entity that you talk to with no judgment, that's this super intelligent, being that's always there with you.
Are we going to retain the monkey meat? Are we going to hang on to the body and through the body have a connection to the rest of animal nature? Or are we going to become disembodied streams of electrons moving in virtual realities that are contained entirely in circuitry?
Good evening. It is Tuesday, September 10th, in the year of our Lord 2024. I am Joe Allen, sitting in for Stephen Bannon, who is in prison unjustly. What you just heard there is a small sample of what we have been talking about here on the War Room for years now, techno-religion. It goes by many names. Basic techno-fetishism, transhumanism, posthumanism, long-termism, effective altruism, effective accelerationism. These you could imagine as a kind of a series of denominations that are branching out from one central idea. That idea is based in scientism, where science, at least the current state of science, is viewed as the ground of being, and the future is seen as sacred prophecy, or a number of sacred prophecies, depending on the religious denomination. What we heard there, as I say, is just a small snippet of the mentality that is coming out of Silicon Valley, across America, across Europe, all the way to China. This notion that whereas we once had gods and priests and divine insight and miraculous healing, we now have artificial intelligence, robotics, brain manipulation, and genetic engineering. Now, this is a prevalent belief in Silicon Valley. This is a prevalent belief in AI labs and biological labs all over the world. But if there's one thing that I've learned in studying religion, it's that is step one. The first thing you want to do, understand what these people believe. Step two is a bit more controversial, and you start asking, is what they believe real? Is this really happening? Now, if you follow my work, I have been putting up articles every Monday at jobot.xyz. I've been putting up a podcast every Thursday, the Omega Point podcast. And the theme is what is happening right now in this vast cultural transformation. What do race, robots, and religion mean in such a future in which the gods are AI and the priesthood are those in command of the machine. My latest article is This I Don't Believe, the All-Powerful Godbots Approacheth. If you're curious, come check it out. And if you're not curious, don't worry. These technological transformations will come to you one way or another. Now, back down to planet Earth. You're probably familiar with the recent indictment of Tenet Media and a number of people associated with it, including 2 Russian nationals. Here to speak about this with great expertise, the former federal prosecutor, TJ Harker, also a writer whose work appears at The American Mind, Blaze Media, Man's World, and of course, his own Substack. TJ, thank you very much for joining us. Can we start off, just tell us a little bit about this indictment? When did it come down? Who is involved? And then we'll move on to the broader implications, which, as I've discussed with you, are much more interesting ultimately.
Sure. Yeah, Joe, and thanks for having me on. So back on September 4th, about a week ago, the Department of Justice unsealed an indictment of 2 Russian nationals, a man named Konstantin Kalashnikov and a woman named Elena Afanasyeva. Those are the only 2 people who were actually indicted in this matter. So Tenet Media was not indicted. The talent there, Dave Rubin, Benny Johnson, Tim Pool, Lauren Chen, they also were not indicted. In fact, they were not even explicitly named in the indictment. They were simply identified by pseudonyms. But in short, what the indictment alleges is that these 2 Russian nationals used Tenet Media for the purposes of spreading, as Merrick Garland, the Attorney General of the United States, says, hidden Russian government messaging. And the Deputy Attorney General of the United States, Lisa Monaco, calls it pro-Russia propaganda and disinformation. And specifically, the charges were a failure to register on under what's called the Foreign Agent Registration Act, or FARA.
So what I'm really curious about, you've told me in conversations we've had before that this indictment is not some standalone operation, that this is a much broader effort from the Department of Justice. I know myself, I don't know if this is explicitly involved, but you've seen Dimitri Simes Sr. raided by the FBI. You've seen Scott Ritter raided by the FBI. Also, the New York aide to Kathy Hochul, Linda Sun, who was, a Chinese national. So it seems to go across nationalities and the political spectrum. Can you tell us about what this means in a broader context?
Yeah, sure. So there's a couple things to keep in mind. The first is that FARA, the Foreign Agent Registration Act, is a law that was passed about 80 years ago in 1938. And the purpose of this act is to require people who are agents of foreign principals who are engaged in political activity to simply register with the Attorney General of the United States or the Department of Justice. And so, in other words, if you are an agent, that sounds like a scary word, but basically, if you're a person in the United States and you're working on behalf of a foreign principal in any country overseas, and the thing that you are doing in the United States is political activities, then you need to register. And that's it. You can still engage in the political activities. You simply have to disclose to the government the nature of your relationships, who the foreign principal is, and all your contracts and so forth. And so this law, it has both a criminal component and a civil enforcement component. And for the last 80 years or so, until about 3 to 4 years ago, the criminal component had rarely been used. It was one of those statutes that sort of was buried in the federal code, and it was never touched by federal prosecutors until recently. This actually is unfortunately a practice that is used by federal prosecutors routinely. They sort of dig up a statute, they dust it off, blow the dust off, and then they resuscitate it in a new era when it no longer serves the purposes that it served, in this case, during the Cold War. And here, what it appears that the Department of Justice is doing, in coordination with the Treasury Department and the Department of State and various intelligence agencies, is trying to, one, further its efforts to censor what it considers to be propaganda within the United States, and then two, to discredit or deplatform those various commentators on the right wing who deliver messages to their audiences that are inconsistent with the messages that the Biden-Harris administration and the general sort of leftist prevailing orthodoxy want Americans to hear. So what I'm saying, in effect, is that FARA, in this case, and in two other recent issues that were disclosed by the Department of Justice, a separate indictment and an affidavit of probable cause relating to a seizure warrants, are not really being used for the purposes of prosecuting people, at least in this Tenet Media case. Instead, what they're intended to do, and what it appears that the government is trying to do, is to discredit American right-wing commentators by causing Americans to associate in their minds people like Tim Pool and Benny Johnson and Dave Rubin with the Russians. It's sort of analogous to what the left has done with Hitler. If you can establish in the minds of Americans that Hitler is terrible and then establish that Donald Trump is Hitler, well, then you don't need to do any more thinking. You simply know what you need to know about Donald Trump. Similarly, the United States government and Department of Justice as well has made tremendous efforts to try to get Americans to think that everything Russian is bad. Russia, 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 it's terrible. And then if they can get Americans simultaneously to associate anybody with the Russians, then the Americans won't have to do any thinking. They can simply know that those people are bad. And in this case, the goal of the Department of Justice, you've heard that saying, an organization's purpose is what it does. Here, the purpose is to get Americans to associate Tim Pool, Benny Johnson, and others with Russia, and therefore make that negative association. But otherwise, it doesn't have a legitimate purpose. And I should point out, by the way, that FARA makes no inquiry into whether or not the information that is being communicated to Americans by Tenet Media is true or false. It makes no inquiry into whether or not the information benefits Russia or harms Russia, or benefits the United States or harms the United States. That's simply irrelevant. This is really a technical violation of a failure to register. And not only that, but there is no allegation in the indictment that any of the information that was propagated by Tenet Media was harmful to the United States in any way. So that's the sort of a summary overview of what's going on in this prosecution, what the ostensible purpose is, that is to prosecute these two Russian nationals, and what the actual purpose is, which is to further the government's attempt to censor information, the United States government's attempt to censor information that it does not find palatable to its political goals.
Yes, we've heard a lot from people like Mike Benz talking about these broad censorship efforts. I believe he calls it weapons of mass deletion. And this certainly seems to be a pretext for honing in on certain individuals and certain issues. You'd listed a number of individuals who were being associated in this way with Russia and Russian manipulation and propaganda, Tim Pool, Benny Johnson, so on and so forth. But also of interest are the issues themselves that these people are talking about. I've seen various claims that issues like open borders, issues like runaway inflation, even issues like diversity and equity and inclusion being directed against whites, in particular white males, that these are also being associated with Russian propaganda. It reminds me very much of when Hunter Biden's laptop was being dismissed as Russian disinformation with the document presented by I think it was 51 intel agents saying it had all the hallmarks of Russian disinformation. If you could just tease out some of these issues and the ways in which the media, by way of this Department of Justice indictment, the ways that the media are basically creating this negative association in the mind of the listener and not allowing people to think through real issues that are affecting real Americans.
Yeah, no, that's a great question, Joe. And so let's work backwards from the consequences so far. So among the consequences to this DOJ indictment were that Lauren Chen was fired from Blaze Media, YouTube shut off the Tenet Media channel, and then the various 5 or 6 talent figures associated with Tenet Media obviously are out of that job anyway, and that job was fairly lucrative for some of them there. So you would think that in the context of a DOJ indictment, now let me step back for a moment. When the Department of Justice brings an indictment, as I did many times when I was a federal prosecutor, when it brings an indictment, the goal is to prosecute somebody. And among the various considerations that you take into account when bringing a charge like this is, will the defendants actually show up in court? In other words, can we arrest them? Can we extradite them if they're overseas and so forth, so that we can have our day in court, we can show the public our evidence, and we can attempt to get a conviction. But in this case, the DOJ would have known all along that Afanasyev and Kalashnikov were going to come to the United States and would never be extradited. And those are the only two named defendants in the United States. What this means is that the purpose of this indictment is not actually to prosecute those two people who will never set foot in a United States court, almost certainly. But instead, it's to do something else. And that other thing can only be understood as intentionally creating this atmosphere of negative associations, this deplatforming, this defunding that resulted in these various right-wing commentators. So including, as I mentioned, firing Lauren Chen from Blaze Media, shutting down the YouTube channel for Tenet Media, and so forth. So you would ask yourself as a regular American, well, okay, Merrick Garland said that the information that Tenet Media was spreading was, quote, hidden Russian government messaging. And Lisa Monaco, the Deputy Attorney General of the United States, said this is pro-Russia propaganda and disinformation. Well, what exactly was the information that they're saying is disinformation and propaganda and hidden Russian government messaging? We can look into several other documents that were released around the same time. There was on September 4th as well, released the same day as this Kalashnikov Afanasyev indictment, was what's called an affidavit of probable cause, a search warrant and a seizure warrant that the FBI had signed by a magistrate judge to seize a bunch of what are called fake websites or doppelganger websites. That is, websites that Russian intelligence had created to look like the Washington Post, to look like Fox News, to look like various German news outlets like Der Spiegel and others, and then to put stories on those various outlets that were designed, as Lisa Monaco says and Merrick Garland says, to be disinformation. But here's actually what was in that type of those stories. So I'm actually going to quote from the affidavit of probable cause, wherein the FBI gained access to some FSB documents, Russian intelligence documents, specifying their intelligence operations plan. So here are 5 or 6 of those messages, and I wrote these down in advance because they're actually in the affidavit. You can find it. It's all publicly available. But this is what our government says is the Russian government engaging in disinformation. Number 1, America is spending too much money. Number 2, America has numerous domestic problems. Number 3, America should focus on its domestic problems before sending billions of dollars to Ukraine. Number 4, that America is discriminating against white people. Number 5, that rising prices are creating difficulties for ordinary Americans. And this is really interesting. And there's a bunch more like that. I think the takeaway here is almost every listener to the War Room would understand those points to not be disinformation at all. They would likely have concluded that those things were true not 2 years ago or a year and a half ago when the Russians began funding Tenet Media, but 5 or 10 or arguably 20 or 25 years ago. So in other words, what the Russian government is doing is trying to get information to Americans. And what the United States government is doing is blocking that information. Now, let me be perfectly clear here. I'm not apologizing for the Russian government. There are things that they are doing that are clearly illegal, like, for example, creating a fake Washington Post website. But again, this is not about providing some remedy to the Washington Post or providing some prosecution that results in jail time of an individual. All of it is being done for different purposes, which is evident from the fact I pointed out earlier, namely that Kalashnikov and Afanasyev will never set foot in the United States. So I'll stop there, and you add any detailed questions you want, and I can help fill it in.
Well, something that in the time we have left, I would like to tease out another kind of big picture narrative here and pattern. You had mentioned that this is kind of like an inversion of previous Cold War positions, that in many ways what we're seeing is an information war on the basis of these two world powers that resembles what we saw during the Cold War, but is in fact flipped on its head. If you could just go into that in the last few minutes that we have here.
Sure. Yeah. So, a good rule of thumb is ask yourself in any sort of geopolitical struggle, which way can the information flow? And which way can it not flow? And once you have identified which way the information cannot flow, then ask yourself, why can it not flow in that direction? And once you've done that, you're likely figured out who the bad guys are in your various information warfare programs. So during the Cold War, the United States used all sorts of effective tools and techniques to reach Soviet citizens inside the Soviet Union. We used Voice of America, Radio Free Europe. We used various cultural exchanges and other techniques, educational exchanges. And at the same time, what the Soviet government, what the NKVD and later the KGB did was try to stop that from happening. They literally jammed the signals broadcast by Radio Free Europe and Voice of America. They absolutely dominated domestic media. You've heard of Pravda from during the Soviet era. They engaged in extensive indoctrination and education. And of course, they had extensive internal surveillance. So information during the Cold War, it was not easy for it to flow into the Soviet Union, right? Because the Soviet secret police forces and foreign and domestic intelligence services blocked it from coming into the country. Today, what you have is the exact opposite. Again, let's just be clear. It is not the case that everything that the Russian government says is true or is designed to help America. However, it is the case that the United States government is trying to prevent you from understanding what they want to say, which is why you can no longer watch RT television in the United States, which is why this indictment was brought. And so it's a strange thing to say this, but we're living in this inverted Cold War posture where we are actually the prisoners inside this informational prison into which information from a foreign source cannot easily reach us. And that information, incidentally, as I just pointed out, is information that many people on the right wing would say is true. Now, another thing I should point out is the reason the Russian intelligence services are interested in advancing this narrative is because it's easy to advance a narrative that is true. It's much harder to advance a narrative that's false. And so in the indictments that I've read and in the various affidavits that I've read, almost all the information that is presented as exhibits is both true and not contested by the Department of Justice as true. And I should point out again that even in the case of Tenet Media, there is no allegation whatsoever that anything that Benny Johnson or Tim Pool or Dave Rubin created was anything different than they would have created and had in fact already created before Tenet Media was being funded by these outside Russian sources. So again, this is not about the truth or falsity of the information. It's simply about deplatforming and defunding those people who want to send a message that is both consistent with the truth and inconsistent with the leftist sort of prevailing woke regime's orthodoxy.
Well, TJ, once again, you've painted a very detailed, if dark, picture. We really appreciate you coming on. Now, we've read your writing at American Mind, at Blaze, at Man's World, elsewhere, but where can people find you? And if you would, just direct the audience to your Substack, which is full of all sorts of fascinating essays. Anyone listening to this surely knows that they've got a real treat in store for them, however dark and depressing it may be at times. Where can we find you, TJ?
Yeah, Joe, you can find me at tjharker.com, which will redirect to the Substack Amicus Republicae, or Friend of the Republic.
Thank you very much, sir. TJ Harker, always willing to fight no matter what the odds are. We'll be coming back with Jack Posobiec, who's on the ground in Philadelphia in the run-up to the debate tonight, and also Matt Boyle from Breitbart Media. You might wonder how it is that I maintain this wild and crazy stare. I can tell you right now, the secret is coffee, transhuman levels of caffeine. If you want to support the War Room, go to our partner's website, warpath.coffee, promo code Bannon. Of course, in Bannon's absence, we're going to have to drink his coffee for him. Maybe you can help. Warpath.coffee, promo code Bannon. You too can be loud. You too can stare at the camera with these wild and crazy eyes. Stay tuned. We were going to a break. We'll be back with Jack Posobiec and Matt Boyle.
In these crazy times, there is peace of mind in security. Security for our country, security for our leaders, and security for our families. But you're not financially secure if all your eggs are in one basket. Gold and silver are an excellent way to diversify your savings. They're a hedge against inflation. With Birch Gold Group, you can own physical gold and silver in a tax-sheltered retirement account. Secure your family's savings today. Text Bannon to 989898 and receive a free info kit on gold. Plus, this August only, Birch Gold is giving away free Trump silver coins with any purchase. This brand new one-of-a-kind silver coin features Trump boldly raising his fist in the moments after the attempt on his life. Don't miss your chance to own this special piece of history, a celebration of a leader dedicated to our security, preserved in the security of a precious metals coin. Secure your savings today and get your free Trump silver coins. Text Bannon to 989898 today. That's Bannon to the number 989898. Homes across America are being stolen every day. It's called title theft, and it's why you need to get home title protection from HomeTitleLock.com today. If no one's keeping an eye on your title, then it's just a matter of time until they target you too. Don't fall prey to these thieves. Go to HomeTitleLock.com today and make sure your title is safe. Use promo code Bannon and get a complete title scan of your home's title and your first 30 days of triple lock home title protection for free. That's HomeTitleLock.com, promo code Bannon.
All this nonsense, all this spin, they can't handle the truth.
War Room Battleground with Stephen K. Bannon.
All right, Posse, welcome back. I am Joe Allen, sitting in for Stephen K. Bannon, who is locked up in prison unjustly. We have for you tonight Matt Boyle of Breitbart News. He is the Washington chief. And we have, of course, our own Jack Posobiec, author and publisher of Unhumans, and the upcoming book, if I'm not mistaken, it is called Bulletproof, although the cover seems to indicate something else. Maybe he can give us a little detail on that afterwards. But Jack, if we could start with you. Jack is on the ground right now in Philadelphia. I'm just curious, what is the vibe like, and what do you anticipate so far as issues coming up in the debate between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris? And, as much as I fear that right now they have Kamala in a cryogenic chamber, frozen, programming her brain with information and ready to wake her up with an injection of some Biden special, we can always hope that it's nothing but a little white wine and Xanax. So what do you think, Jack? What are we going to see tonight?
Well, Joe, thanks again so much for having me on. That's right. We are publishing the new book, Bulletproof, the first book on the Trump assassination attempt and the Biden coup. It's going to be coming out on October 22nd. Amazon was playing a little bit of games with our cover, but we have prevailed. We are victorious. And so it's going to be up there. People can go to Amazon and check out the pre-sale, Bulletproof. Now, we're here in Philadelphia. We are in my hometown. This is Independence Hall behind me, folks. This is where it all started. George Washington, the Declaration, Ben Franklin, John Adams. Declaration of Independence was literally written by Thomas Jefferson in a building right on this street, right at 5th and Market, right where I stand right now. This is the spot. And then the Constitution, of course, and the Second Continental Congress and the First Continental Congress right behind me in this building. This was America's birthplace, and what better place to come than to decide the direction of our republic and decide the future of Western civilization than right back to the spot where the republic was born. Now, Kamala Harris, as you mentioned, she's about 10 blocks away. I'm not going to say the name of the hotel, but I know exactly where she is, where she's conducting her debate prep, which largely consists of memorizing verbatim, word for word, these chunks of policies, these chunks of phrases, and she is going for a very Marco Rubio style where she's trying to do rote memorization of policy rather than Donald Trump and the freewheeling style and the freewheeling types of debate prep that he is known for. She, of course, a lot of anxiety, very anxious. She is, of course, going to be doing anything she can or imbibing anything she can to take that edge off. So what you're going to see here is she's going to try to stick to the script, and I think she's going to use this prosecutorial line, turn the debate into a show trial of Donald Trump, and of course the media will say that was the real trial of Trump, and CNN will come back with all of it. Whereas Donald Trump, he has the ability ability to be the voice of the people, to come out and tell the truth about what's going on in our country, tell the truth about the 20,000 Haitian migrants that have descended on one town, Springfield, Ohio, and be the voice of so many forgotten people. And we know that he doesn't need scripted lines because he's the best writer himself. He's got that ability to try to knock her off script as well. And I certainly hope that he goes on the offense and does this. Now, ABC, they've been ranked as the most biased of the big three broadcast networks. So we're really going to see that on display. Are they going to play it in the pocket the way that CNN did when it was Dana Bash and Jake Tapper, or are they going to try to take that defensive role, in which case it would be President Trump essentially debating against three people all at once?
Matt Boyle, Washington bureau chief for Breitbart News Network. Matt Boyle, what do you think about it? When you're looking forward to this debate tonight, what issues do you foresee? How do you foresee the performance unfolding? And do you think that this muted mic is going to be to Trump's advantage, as many believe, or is it just a non-issue?
I think the muted mic thing is definitely to Trump's advantage. The big picture here is that you have to look at where the race is as it stands right now. And obviously this weekend, we saw the New York Times poll come out that showed Donald Trump has a national lead over Kamala Harris. If Donald Trump is within 2% in the national popular vote, he's going to crush her in the Electoral College, right? Like, so what we're seeing right now is that Donald Trump is in the driver's seat in this presidential election right now. Kamala Harris is sliding in badly. So all pressure is on Kamala Harris tonight to have a fantastic performance. She has to have a grand slam, knock it out of the park, career game, if you will. If you're looking at it like a sports analogy, I mean, she's going to go 4 for 4 at the plate with 2 home runs to win this debate tonight. All pressure's on her to turn the trajectory of this race around. So if she doesn't have the best performance in presidential debate history this evening, then the trajectory of this race is such that it's sliding away from Kamala Harris and it's moving towards Trump. We're seeing it across the battleground states. The fact of the matter is Donald Trump has, because of the way the Electoral College is structured and the way that the various states are going to go out there, Donald Trump has far more pathways to 270 electoral votes than Kamala Harris does. There's been new polling the last couple of days out of the state of Georgia. Donald Trump has a clear lead there. Out of North Carolina, it's a close race, but Donald Trump has the lead. And out of Pennsylvania, we've seen a number of polls that show a tie race, which probably means Trump has the lead. So if Donald Trump wins North Carolina, Georgia, and Pennsylvania, he is the next president of the United States. It's that simple. That doesn't even get into states like Arizona, where Trump does appear to have the lead. It doesn't get into states like Nevada, where Trump appears to have the lead. Wisconsin and Michigan are a little bit tighter, but there's some Wisconsin polling showing a tie or a slight Kamala edge. Michigan polling is pretty much a tie or a tight Trump edge. But the fact is that across the board, Kamala Harris has to desperately turn things around. So she has to have a career game tonight. And I don't know if she will. Maybe she will. Maybe she won't. We'll see how it goes. But if you're Trump, if you just stick to the issues and you lay out the case and you tie Kamala Harris to the unpopularity of the current administration, which she is the vice president of, I think you'll do fine.
Well, maybe they are injecting her with nanobots as we speak and preparing to blast her with 5G and give her all the answers she needs. Jack Posobiec, there's something that I'm really interested in insofar as this crazy news cycle that we've seen. I mean, it's constant, right? You've got the war in Ukraine shifting in favor of Russia and a lot of the American support being withdrawn. You've got this mad immigration situation with the open borders and all of these issues highlighted in Springfield, Ohio, and with the various confrontations, we'll put it mildly, between the Haitian immigrants. There have been some 20,000 dumped on a city of 50,000. But something, if you could touch on any of those, but also as the media and the news background, but also this recent assassination attempt. Nobody knows that subject better than you. Do you think that will even come up in the debate? And if so, how would Trump be able to use it to his advantage? How would Kamala Harris be able to defend herself, given that she's kind of helped create this environment that would allow such a thing to happen?
Well, Joe, that's actually a great question. And I'll tell you exactly how Trump should, and obviously you don't want to play politics with something like an assassination attempt, but we know that she is going to be the one who brings up political violence first, because there's a 10 out of 10 chance that one of the first things she does in this prosecutorial approach is she will bring up January 6th. She will say January 6th, she will talk about political violence, she will raise that specter, and all he has to do is turn around and say, excuse me, just 2 months ago in this very state where we are right now, it's the other end of the state, where we are right now, I took a bullet for democracy. I took a bullet for the people of this country. I took a bullet, and we got a lot of questions. Melania Trump, of course, releasing the video this morning saying that she has questions that have left unanswered about why law enforcement didn't arrest Thomas Matthew Crooks. But he can flip it on her directly to say, excuse me, I experienced direct political violence and was 1 inch away from losing my life. So don't tell me about you being concerned about political violence, because I know more about it than anybody in this room. And he can absolutely dominate on that. It would be a similar turnaround to what he did with Ted Cruz when Ted Cruz talked about New York values, and then Donald Trump brought up 9/11, because 9/11 for so many people, obviously an emotional event. Donald Trump was there in the city. He talks about being in the penthouse of Trump Tower, watching the towers fall. He could smell it. He then went down a couple of days later. You mentioned Springfield, Ohio as well. I think it's a fantastic opportunity to bring up the fact that she stood and publicly supported the increase in TPS, temporary protected status, for hundreds of thousands of Haitians coming into the United States after the assassination, by the way, of the Haitian president back in 2021 by U.S.-backed Colombian mercenaries. So there's so many opportunities to bring up how she has paid in her administration. By the way, another line out there that he should that I'd love to hear is, don't say the Biden-Harris administration, say the Kamala Biden administration. The Kamala Biden administration has paid for these migrants to travel 1,600 miles to the town of Springfield, Ohio, and they killed a little boy, Aiden Clark, on the first day of school last year. They killed him when you had with one of these guys driving, who had been stopped at the border, who had been let out under the Kamala Biden policies, had been traveled to Springfield, Ohio, drives a car, crashes into a school bus with no license, had no papers, and killed a little boy on the first day of school. So what do you think about that, Kamala Harris? What do you have to say to the family of Aiden Clark? And there's, so many opportunities for him to go on offense.
Matt Boyle, do you have anything to add to that? Or perhaps we move on to inflation and Russian disinformation?
Yeah, well, look, I think the big picture here, again, is that Kamala Harris is desperately trying to differentiate herself from Joe Biden, except there's two major stories that came out this morning, both from the New Republic, which is not a conservative outlet, right? I mean, they're a left-wing magazine, if there ever was one, right? I mean, they make the Atlantic look like Fox News. But the fact is that the New Republic, the first and foremost, identified that the new policy page that Kamala Harris put up on her campaign website just this weekend, right? Like 50 days into being the presidential candidate, she finally puts a policy page on her website, was mostly copy and pasted from Joe Biden's campaign website. So sloppily, in fact, that they literally left the metadata in there that said all throughout the the coding on the website that people should vote for Joe Biden, so not Kamala Harris for president. And so that's up there. And then the second big piece, also from the New Republic, is a warning from this left-wing magazine to the Kamala Harris campaign that she needs to course correct and quickly, otherwise she's going to lose. So again, what Kamala needs to do here, there's an enormous amount of pressure on her here. Again, she has to have a career game this evening in this debate, whereas Trump just has to go up there and talk about the policies, right? Just like what Jack was talking about there. Whether it's on immigration, whether it's on, as you mentioned there, the economy and inflation, whether it's on foreign policy, right? Like, and we saw enormous successes during the Trump administration. You're going to hear Kamala Harris completely and repeatedly use those phrases, catchphrases that you heard at the Democrat National Convention. Things like joy, things like "we're not going back," right? Like that's what they're going to try to do. Those catchphrases and repeated lines. But as long as Trump, when they say we're not going back, what are they saying? They're saying we're not going back to the no inflation. We're not going back to low energy prices. We're not going back to peace and stability worldwide. We're not going back to a secure border. Those are the things Americans want. They want to go back, right? Like they want to go back to the Trump administration policies, and they're not going to get that from Kamala Harris because Kamala Harris is literally copying and pasting off of the guy for whom she's been the vice president for the last 4 years, and her, Biden's right-hand woman executing all of his policies. So, again, what we will see is Kamala Harris probably try to use some of those catchphrases in a key viral moment. That's what she's looking for, and she's going to try to do the whole prosecute Trump thing from the stage. As long as Trump keeps his cool and stays focused, and back to your original question about the muted mics, I think the muted mics helps Trump because it's going to force him to not interject and speak over her, and instead he's going to think through what he's going to say, and when he does that, I think that his responses will be strong, and I think he'll come off as competent, and she won't, right? Like she doesn't have a grasp of the issues to the point where she could write her own website, right? She literally can't write her own website. She had to pull it off of Joe Biden's website, and that's the tell here, is that she's going to show the world that she doesn't have a clear command of the issues. Trump is going to show the world that he does, and because of that, I don't think the trajectory of this race changes. If anything, it accelerates on the trajectory that we're on, which is moving Trump's way.
You talk about joy, and there's the classic one, what can be unburdened by what has been. I've heard, some analysis that Kamala Harris is actually a brilliant communist scholar in disguise. I think that my own perspective is that she is a massive dingbat, but, these are matters of if I could just, I know Jack doesn't have drinks wisely, by the way, WarRoom Posse, but if I could just suggest that tonight we have a drinking game, everyone get bottles of white wine, and every time Kamala Harris says joy, you just take a slug and we see where we end up. In the last couple of minutes we have here, fellas, Jack, tell us, where can we find you? Tell us where to find the new book, Bulletproof, and sir, Godspeed on your way through Philadelphia, his own stomping grounds.
Hey, man, always happy to come home to the city of brotherly love. And that's what I am. I'm the man who spreads brotherly love. Look, you go Bulletproof. It's up Barnes & Noble. It's on Amazon. You can get it there also directly from Skyhorse. Bulletproof, how a shot meant for Donald Trump took out Joe Biden. And of course, we'll be here locking it down on Real America's Voice. I'm also going to be stepping behind the scenes for a special operation that I'll be talking about a little bit after the show. But shout out to the WarRoom Posse. And of course, shout out to Stephen K. Bannon, who is a political prisoner and remains one until he is released.
Free Steve Bannon. Jack Posobiec, thank you very much. Matt Boyle, where can we find you? And we do have another minute. If you have anything to add before giving us your coordinates, please, by all means, do so.
Yeah, so we'll be doing live coverage on Breitbart this evening. So just go to Breitbart.com. That's BREITBART.com. Our whole team of reporters all work very hard, and they are all going to be, pushing stories up all throughout the evening. We'll have, live coverage and live wire and, all sorts of different. These big nights are like the Super Bowl for us, or like a playoff game. So our team is working very hard. We'll be putting up dozens of pieces off different things that happen throughout the evening, and then the post-debate spin as well. I'm also on Twitter or X at MBoyle1 and on True Social at Real Matt Boyle. But this is a huge night, and I think that there's a massive potential here that if it goes the way we think it will, that Donald Trump could, again, at a debate, wipe out his opponent. So we'll see how it goes, but all pressure is on Kamala Harris. She has to have a career game, and I don't know if she has it in her.
Well, we can always hope, sir. I really appreciate you coming by, giving us your insight. Matt Boyle, Washington Bureau Chief at Breitbart News Network. Thank you very much, sir.
You bet.
All right, War Room Posse, that is tonight at 9 p.m. Debate with Donald Trump and Kamala Harris. We will find out if the satanic wizards and the Gnostic communists behind her are able to inject her with nanobots, shoot her with 5G, and give her all the brilliant statements she needs to destroy Donald Trump, or if Trump dances around her as if she were a sombrero and he was doing a Mexican hat dance. I am looking forward to it, sitting on the edge of my seat. Be sure to get your bottle of white wine. Every time Kamala Harris says joy, take a slug. Unless you don't drink, just grape juice is fine. And of course, find my work at joebot.xyz. Thank you, Godspeed, and good night.